Good morning, gentlemen. It's nice to talk to you again. And this time I'm going to talk about Ukraine and the battle and how it's going. Why I want to talk about is because I've received a lot of messages and emails, and people want to ask and they want to know what's happening in Ukraine. 100 days of the battle has gone, and where are the Russians now? What is the stand of the Americans? How is the war going to end? Or will it end at all? Now let's have a look at the map of Europe, and you will see that the Russians have occupied 20% of Ukrainian territory. Now that is a hard fact. But they've taken 100 days to capture this, which is a lot of time. That means it shows a resilience in the Ukrainian defense, number one. Number two, it also shows a lack of application of the Russians, because the Russians have not launched an all-out war. That is the point which I must make here. They didn't launch an all-out war. They never carried out an aerial bombing of Ukraine like the Americans did of North Vietnam for so many years when they had B-52s flying and bombing North Vietnam. They bombed Iraq for 70 days before they began the invasion of Iraq. Russians didn't do anything like that, and that's a fact. They didn't do it. Why they didn't do it, I can't answer. But probably they were thinking it's going to be a limited military engagement and it will all be over soon. But they hadn't calculated with the mind of the Americans. They were not going to let Russians off the hook, come what may. And this was the time they wanted to nail the Russians, because the Russia they had considered as their enemy, the raison d'etre for why they have NATO. Otherwise there's no use of NATO. So NATO has to have an enemy. They created Russia. And the same country, Russia, during the time of Boris Yeltsin, had applied to the United States to join NATO, and Clinton was the president. He said no. He gave some wishy-washy answer. All that is now over. They were expanding NATO eastwards to encircle Russia. Then Putin saw through the game and he launched the invasion. The reasons were okay, but militarily he didn't have that sort of success. He didn't achieve the success which he should have achieved, and that is a fact. The first foray to capture Kiev and Kharkiv failed. Maybe it was faulty intelligence. More so, I feel, it was lack of application, because it went into Ukraine like it was a picnic party, without any aerial bombardment, nothing. And they thought the Ukrainians are going to lay down their arms. It doesn't happen like that. But they changed tactics and they then attacked on the eastern front. And they have already captured some very significant areas in that region. The war as it stands is, 100 days have elapsed. The Russian army is moving very slowly forward. There is resistance, but I think the resistance is weakening. As we saw in Mariupol, in the Azov plant, when 2,400 of the so-called daredevil fighters surrendered. They gave up, said thank you. And now the president of Germany and France, Mr. Macron, they wanted the Russians to release those soldiers. This is war. You don't release soldiers just like that, so they go back and start fighting again. The Americans have also been giving weapons, but they have refrained from giving weapons to Ukraine by which they could attack Russia. Now that's a very significant point. Ukraine wanted rockets they could use to attack Russia. The Americans said no. Why? Because the moment you do that, you are going to light a matchstick for World War III, and then Western civilization is going to be finished. I've said it repeatedly. It's going to be all over by the shouting. Small countries like Denmark, Belgium, they won't exist anywhere. The end of it. These countries are just surviving by catching the coat lapels of Uncle Sam, and I don't know what's in future for them. The historical cycle has to take place, and too long has the Western world dominated the world. NATO is their last attempt to dominate this world. Last attempt, a daredevil attempt by the Americans. They failed. They had so many pacts earlier, Baghdad Pact, Seattle, CENTO, all have gone, end of it. And now they should be more bothered about Taiwan falling into the hands of the Chinese. And that is also their own creation. We'll talk about that at a later stage. The Russian offensive has picked up. That's one point. And they had a tough time in trying to capture Mariupol. They have taken it. There's another significant city they have recently captured, and now they're on their way towards Odesa. Now that's a very significant city. It's the main port of Ukraine. And if the Russians can capture that within, say, 2 to 3 weeks, victory would be assured. This battle is going to carry on. I don't see it ending. But there is likely to be a twist. You never know what sort of twist is going to take place. And I have a very strange feeling that in case the battle prolongs, Putin is not going to negotiate. He doesn't believe in it. He will use some more terrible weapon. Maybe engineer a nuclear explosion or something like that. I hope it doesn't happen, but it could happen. And that would mean 50 years of destruction. You know, the half-life of atomic nuclei is 50 years. And Ukraine, as it is, already destroyed, 6.5 million refugees. I mean, how they're going to function? How they're going to survive? They're going to take decades and decades to build up. The Russians have been fighting. I can't say much about their motivation, because that appears to me a little suspect. Because basically the Ukrainians and the Russians are the same people, but Zelensky went and created this divide. He thought he was going to be a great hero, and he's ended up being a villain, you know. He's brought destruction on Ukraine. Ukraine was the granary of Europe. It's finished, doesn't exist now. And Ukraine very soon will become a landlocked country. And the countries Ukraine they are relying upon and the countries Ukraine is relying on are Poland and Belgium and all these countries. They got no relevance. They'll just vanish in no time. That's a fact. The country that really matters is the United States, and I don't think the United States has yet decided to give offensive weapons to Ukraine. But the point is, even if you give the weapons, offensive weapons, it's a double-edged sword. Russians will also use severe offensive weapons. While Russia is a big country, Ukraine is a small, they just get wiped out. So it's not something like that. It's not MAD, matured, mutual assured destruction. It's not going to happen that way. Here is going to be a one-way ticket and Ukraine get destroyed. And then there could be World War III also. So the Americans are very careful. They're playing their cards close to their chest. And they know what is likely to happen. It's going to be a very, very terrible situation. The Russians have done reasonably well. I don't say that they have won the battle or something. They could have done better. And that is, I have already said, they didn't follow the principles of war, that is concentration of force and proper planning, administration. They didn't do that. You can't just walk into a battle, you know, like you're going for a picnic or something. That's what it appears to me the Russians thought initially, when they just went into Ukraine and asked the Ukrainian army to surrender, you know, lay down your arms. Nobody does anything like that. They didn't carry out any serious bombing the way the Americans had carried out in Iraq and Vietnam. They didn't do that. Even now, they are fighting a very limited military engagement. But they are moving forward. And as it stands, I presume that soon the city of Odesa will be in Russian hands. And once that's happened, 50% of the battle would have been won. Then the Russians will turn their attention to other parts of Ukraine. Despite all the bravado, the talks by the Polish Prime Minister, the Bulgarians, the Danes and the Belgians, these countries don't matter. I mean, they can just keep talking, it's got irrelevant. You know, like the caravan goes, people keep shouting here and there. And my worry is that these countries may be sucked into the vortex of World War III and just cease to exist. There's a possibility. Let's not forget what Nikita Khrushchev, first secretary of the Communist Party, said way back in 1961. He said, I need just 5 hydrogen thermonuclear bombs and England will cease to exist on the world map. Let's not play with fire. I wonder if Biden really thought on this aspect, because he appears to have a very, very limited horizon to my way of mind. I think he could have done a lot better instead of trying to antagonize the Russians. I have seen some very interesting programs by American correspondents and think tanks who have said that the real alliance should have been America and Russia versus China, but it didn't happen that way. Now Russia and China are together. And that's a massive force. How are the Americans going to counter it? They don't have the manpower. Are they going to rely on small countries like Poland and Belgium to fight for them? You can well laugh about it. France is not along with them. And I don't think Germany is going to risk another conflict with Russia like they did in World War II. 10 million Germans died fighting the Russians. It's not an easy thing, you know. So, gentlemen, I think that's about enough for today. The Russian offensive is moving forward, slowly but surely, and the Americans will have to think twice before they do anything further, because it could escalate any day into a nuclear war. Let's hope it doesn't happen. And I close now, gentlemen, and I wish you all the best. Jai Hind. If you like my video, please share it and like it. I shall be highly obliged. Goodbye.